For many fun-loving, adrenaline-addicted thrill seekers, days spent at the amusement park is a long-held summer ritual. Martin Lewison is a business management professor at Farmingdale State College and self-professed roller coaster fanatic. His research and consulting efforts focus mainly on the global amusement and attractions industry. Dr. Lewison, welcome to Newspoint today.
Thank you so much for having me.
You white-knuckled it on over 2,000 roller coasters in some 37 countries. Ever ridden a roller coaster with a mask on?
No, that'll be a first for me, but I'm looking forward to the opportunity.
Well, Disney partially opened in July, as well as Universal Orlando. With the cases of the virus surging in that state, why do you think so many people are flocking to Disney World?
Well, Disney has such a fanatical base of fans, and people are really upset that they can't go to Disney. I mean, people have been feeling shut in for months, and many of those people are missing their annual trip to Florida, first during the spring and now during the summer, which is really the peak season for the Florida and other destination theme parks. So as soon as the gates opened, people were getting in their cars and going there. But I think that most of the visitors have been from either Florida or from the Southeast, because most people are still not willing to fly yet.
Well, aside from the reduced capacity, people can expect a much different guest experience.
That's absolutely true. But I think it's for the safety of the guests and, of course, in cooperation with local health department officials. So guests can now expect a temperature check before they enter the park, and they cannot enter the park without wearing a mask, and they have to keep a mask on all day. There are break areas where it's incredibly hot in Florida in July. So there are areas where you can sort of cool off either indoor or outside with some air conditioning if you want to take your mask off, because everybody knows mask in the heat you're going to sweat under that. But Disney actually, interestingly, removed a mask loophole recently where they said that you didn't have to wear a mask while you were eating or drinking. And so people were walking around the park, eating and drinking without masks on. And eating and drinking while you walk in the park is a favorite thing to do for many visitors. But Disney took away that loophole and said, if you're going to eat or drink, you must be stationary. So you can't walk around with your mask off anymore. They removed that loophole. In addition, some attractions are closed because they're either indoors or air doesn't circulate well. Some attractions have longer than usual wait times, even with the reduced capacity, because there are new operating procedures for cleaning down ride, seats and vehicles and so forth. And in general, it's going to be a different sort of scene. You have to, Disney people love packing it in. Those parks get incredibly crowded, but now there are signs all over the ground telling you to keep your distance from other parties.
Well, there's no question it's going to be a tough season for the industry, but Disney and Universal have a lot of money. That's not necessarily the case for some smaller family-owned operations. What are their prospects like in light of the pandemic?
That's a great question. There are probably about 5,000 different amusement and attraction companies in North America, and most of them are not Disney or Six Flags or Cedar Fair, one of the big operators. They tend to be mom and pop or family owned or small businesses, really. And their closure time is much more of a burden. Disney really not only does Disney have deep pockets, but Disney has other sources of revenue like merchandising and Disney Plus streaming. They own ABC television network in the United States as well. But the small companies don't have that same source of revenue. Moreover, most of those small operators are seasonal, at least the ones with outdoor operations. And this is it. This is the only time when they're able to make hay, between May and say October, when things get too chilly to do outdoor operations. Usually Halloween marks the end of the outdoor season for outdoor attractions. And they are in a real pinch right now because they have to pay some salaries all year, but May through October is the only period of time where they're actually bringing in revenue, with the exception of, say, online season passes and things like that, which they try to push over the winter to get some revenue going. So I think it's a much bigger pinch for those companies that don't have big bank accounts. And right now, the time when they would be earning all of their money for the entire rest of the year, they're not able to. And it's very frustrating. And I know this is true of many small businesses in many different places. New York State, for example, we've reached phase 4. So restaurants, for example, are allowed to open outdoors. But local grocery stores are open. But and those are, of course, indoor businesses. But the small amusement parks, even though they're outdoors, and even though they would have to operate under whatever strictures the authorities and the health officials required, they have not been allowed to open. And so there's a lot of frustration among the small businesses that, small grocery stores are permitted to open where it may not be that safe and they don't really control capacity, but an amusement park, which would probably be heavily regulated in terms of operational guidelines, they're not permitted to open. And that's really not only, I think, many of these same people understand what the issues are, but they find it extremely frustrating. And of course, it puts them they're under an enormous financial burden right now.
Well, and if they were allowed to open, isn't it feasible that people would stick closer to home, support more regional amusement parks, potentially where the crowds are smaller?
Well, I think people are certainly dying to enjoy themselves in one form or another. And it's certainly true. I mean, I don't know that New Yorkers are flying down to Florida right now. Some of them may be, but New York has now 2-week quarantine required for anybody coming from most other states where there's a COVID rise. New York is requiring 2-week quarantine before coming back to New York. So that may be preventing some people from leaving New York State to go to someplace like Disney. But yes, I think it would help the New York economy, for example, if New York attraction facilities were able to open. And of course, even Disney is telling its guests, Disney, Six Flags, Cedar Fair, they're all telling their guests that you are taking on a risk. So they're all, there's an implicit waiver where guests are being told, we're taking reasonable precautions and acting guests to behave according to our rules. But that doesn't mean there's no possibility of risk of infection when you visit here. So guests know they're taking on some risks. And I think New York amusement attractions would also have to make the same disclosure to any of their guests. But at the same time, I believe that the New York, even the small operators, are also going to take whatever would be considered reasonable precautions, extra sanitizing, reduced capacity, requiring distancing inside queues, mask wearing. I think that under those circumstances, the parks are going to take at least what precautions are reasonable to take.
Well, you are an expert at this industry. What is at risk if the smaller operations face closure?
Well, I think that there's certainly going to be some bankruptcies. I can't tell you, these are small private companies. You can open up Disney's, financials any day because they're a publicly owned company. But the smaller companies, their books are closed, they're private. So we don't know precisely who's under pressure and who's not. But I certainly know small operators who don't have huge profit margins to begin with and haven't been able to open since March. They can't be in a good position. I mean, plenty of my local restaurants, have given up the ghost and announced that it's unlikely that they'll reopen. So it's certainly within the realm of possibility that some of our favorite local amusement parks won't be able to reopen. I mean, there were closures before COVID. So, I mean, there are more extinct amusement parks than there are existing amusement parks. It's a difficult industry. And ever since the 1950s, when television started competing with going out to the amusement parks, and then, Nintendo competes with amusement park. Essentially, any other leisure activity competes with your local amusement park. So it's a tough industry. And it was already hard to attract the amusement dollar from clientele. So if you can't even bring a single guest in, that's got to be a disaster for some of them.
However, there was a report pre-pandemic from Amusement Parks US that attendance and profits were expected to climb into 2024. In your expert opinion, what does the industry need to do to rebound and grow again?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, or the zillion-dollar question. And it's the same question is being faced by entertainment companies in the entertainment industry, cruise industry, hospitality, the movie theater industry. How do you deal? What is it? Is it possible to even exist in a COVID world? And so I know probably much of the industry, those industries are getting on their knees and praying for an effective vaccine every night before they go to bed. But it's true that the industry globally was growing. Amusement parks have been becoming more and more popular, and companies, both small and large attractions companies, have been investing in new and better and more modern attractions and adding better food and adding, all kinds of amenities like, tours and special events. And those things have attracted the fans. The internet has allowed the fan community to explode. So even in the dead of winter, there are thousands of people on the internet talking about roller coasters. So I don't know the answer, unfortunately, and it's possible that there will be some sort of contraction in the industry, and it's unfortunate because it's certainly not the industry's fault that all of this has happened. But we can always hope and keep our fingers crossed that those companies are conserving their resources, and with some luck and maybe with a little better policy decisions by our government leaders, it's possible, certainly other countries have shown that it's possible to reduce the harms caused by the coronavirus. And it should be possible to open up our economy in a safer way.
Well, it's no question it is going to be a roller coaster ride for the industry, but we certainly hope that you will be riding the rails again really soon. Dr. Lewison, thank you so much for sharing your insights with NewsPoint today.
Thank you so much. It's been my pleasure.